The smell hits me first when I unlock the door to penthouse 4507, metallic and wrong. My cart catches on the threshold and cleaning supplies rattle as I push through into the foyer. The apartment is silent in that heavy way that makes my skin prickle. I call out my standard greeting, announcing myself as required by elite maid's protocol, but my voice sounds small against the marble and expensive silence. No response. The Fitzwilliam penthouse is my last job of the day, a Tuesday afternoon routine I've done monthly for 8 months now, and Mrs. Fitzwilliam is usually home, polite and distant, offering tea I always decline. But today the sprawling space feels empty. Wrong. I move through the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, past the kitchen that's already immaculate because wealthy people rarely cook, toward the master bedroom. The smell grows stronger. My heart begins a slow, frightened climb up my throat. I should leave, call my supervisor, but my feet keep moving, and then I'm at the bedroom doorway, and I see her. Mrs. Fitzwilliam lies crumpled beside the bed, her cream silk blouse soaked dark red, spreading across the pale carpet in a shape like wings. Oh God! Oh God! I drop to my knees beside her, hands shaking so violently I can barely pull my phone from my pocket. Her eyes flutter open, unfocused and glazed with pain. She's alive. The wound in her abdomen pulses blood, and my hands move without thought, pressing against it, the heat and wet of her blood immediately soaking through my thin work gloves. She gasps, her hand shooting up to grip my wrist with surprising strength. Her lips move, and I lean closer, phone trapped between my shoulder and ear as 911 connects. "James," she whispers. "The ledger. James wants." Her words fragment and fade. I'm babbling to the operator, giving the address, begging them to hurry, maintaining pressure on the wound like some half-remembered first aid video told me to do. Mrs. Fitzwilliam's eyes fix on mine with desperate urgency, her fingers digging into my wrist. "Don't let him. The ledger. Protect." Then her grip loosens, and her eyes roll back, and I'm screaming at the operator that she's dying. She's dying. Please hurry. The front door explodes inward, not opens. Explodes. Heavy footsteps thunder through the apartment, and then the bedroom fills with men, armed men, guns drawn, and my scream catches in my throat as a man in a black suit and controlled fury drops to his knees beside us. His face is all sharp angles and barely contained violence, dark eyes taking in his mother, the blood, my hands pressed against her wound. His mother. I know instantly by the raw terror that cracks through his controlled expression. He looks at me, and his voice comes out rough and commanding. "Don't let my mother die. It's not a request. It's not even a plea. It's an order from a man who gives orders that get followed or else. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from, and what time is it? It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you." The hospital's private floor smells like expensive disinfectant and fear. I sit in a waiting room that's more like a luxury hotel suite. Leather chairs and abstract art on walls that probably cost more than my annual salary. But none of it registers properly because there's a man with a gun standing at the door and I can't leave. I'm not handcuffed. I'm not physically restrained. But when I stood 20 minutes ago and said I should go, that I needed to call my supervisor, the armed man simply looked at me with flat eyes and I sat back down. This is Alexander Fitzwilliam's world. Money and power and violence wrapped in expensive suits and polite threats. The paramedics loaded Mrs. Fitzwilliam onto the gurney with professional efficiency, but their hands shook slightly when Alexander gave them instructions, his voice cold and absolute. And I realized they were terrified of him. Everyone is terrified of him. In the ambulance, he told me I was coming to the hospital, that I was a witness, that I needed to be secured, and the way he said secured made my stomach drop. Now I sit in this beautiful cage and process what I've stumbled into. Mrs. Fitzwilliam, elegant and kind in our brief monthly interactions, is apparently the mother of someone very dangerous. The men with guns aren't private security in any legal sense. No police have arrived despite the stabbing, despite the violence, and that absence is louder than sirens would be. I'm replaying every moment, the smell of blood, her whispered words, when the door opens and a man in his 40s enters. He's built like he knows how to hurt people, but his face is calm, almost gentle. He introduces himself as Thomas, doesn't give a last name, sits across from me and asks what Mrs. Fitzwilliam said. My voice sounds strange when I repeat the words. James. The ledger. James wants. His expression doesn't change, but something shifts behind his eyes. He asks if she said anything else, exactly how she said it. Was I certain of the words? I tell him everything I remember, my hands still tacky with her blood despite washing them twice in the private bathroom. Thomas thanks me, tells me someone will bring me coffee, leaves before I can ask when I can go home. Through the window in the door, I see him approach Alexander, who stands in the hallway staring at surgical doors like he can see through them to his mother. Thomas speaks quietly, and Alexander's jaw tightens. They look at me through the window, and my skin prickles. I'm not just a witness. I'm something else. A complication, a liability, maybe a threat. Alexander paces, and I watch him through the glass. This man who commands armed soldiers and buys hospital floors. His suit is Armani or something equally expensive, now ruined with blood, but he doesn't seem to notice or care. He moves like a predator in a cage, controlled violence in every step, but his face shows something raw. Fear. Not for himself. For her. It makes him almost human. Almost. He catches me watching and our eyes lock through the glass. For a moment, neither of us looks away. Then he moves toward the door and my heart kicks into a faster rhythm. He enters alone, closes the door behind him, and the space suddenly feels smaller. Up close, he's overwhelming, tall and broad and intense in a way that makes me want to retreat except there's nowhere to go. He asks me to tell him exactly what happened from the moment I entered the apartment. Not a request. A command delivered in a voice used to obedience. So I tell him, every detail, what time I arrived, which door I used, the smell that was wrong, finding her, her words. He listens with complete focus, dark eyes never leaving my face, and I feel dissected under that gaze. The car ride to the safe house happens in tense silence, Alexander in front with the driver, me in back with Thomas, whose calm presence somehow makes everything more frightening, because if he's here to watch me, I must be worth watching, or worth guarding, or worth keeping from running. The building we pull up to is all glass and steel, in a neighborhood I recognize as expensive, the kind of place with doormen who earn more than I do. Alexander doesn't ask if I'm coming. He simply gets out and waits, and I follow, because what choice do I have? The elevator requires a keycard and takes us to the 19th floor, where there are only two doors, and Alexander unlocks the one on the left, ushering me into an apartment that's bigger than anywhere I've ever lived, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looks like it belongs in magazines, everything cold and beautiful and impersonal. I start to speak, to protest that I have a job and a roommate and a life even if it's small, but Alexander cuts me off with a look. You're staying here until I know who stabbed my mother and why, and whether you're in danger or involved. His voice is flat, final. I'm not involved, I say, hating how my voice shakes. I'm a maid who showed up at the wrong time. He studies me with those dark eyes that seem to see too much. Maybe. Or maybe my mother told you something else. Maybe you know more than you're saying. Maybe whoever did this thinks you know more. Either way, you stay where I can see you. It's not a discussion, Clara. I want to argue, want to demand my rights, want to call someone, but my phone is still at the hospital, and Thomas is standing by the door like a well-dressed guard, and I realize with creeping cold fear that I'm essentially a prisoner. Alexander shows me to a guest room, points out the bathroom, tells me Thomas will bring essentials from my apartment. And then he's gone, door closing behind him with a soft click that sounds like a cell locking. I sit on the edge of the bed that's too soft, too expensive, and reality crashes through the adrenaline that's been holding me together. I found a woman bleeding. I'm being held by her son, who commands armed men and makes hospitals erase attempted murders. I should be terrified. I am terrified. But underneath the fear is something else, something I don't want to examine too closely. The way Alexander looked at his mother, the desperation and love and raw terror. The way he said, "Don't let her die," like prayer and command and plea all together. He's dangerous, clearly, obviously, but he's also human in a way I wasn't expecting. I pace the room, exploring because sitting still makes the fear worse. The apartment is immaculate, decorated in grays and blacks and whites, expensive art on walls, kitchen with appliances that probably cost more than my car. No personal touches, no photos, no warmth. It's a safe house in truth, not a home. I'm examining a painting when I hear his voice from another room, hard and cold and nothing like the broken man at his mother's side. Find James Redmond. I want to know where he is, who he sent, how he got past my security. And Thomas, when you find him, bring him to me. I'll make him pay for what he did to her. The violence in those words sends ice down my spine and I back away. But the floor creaks, and suddenly Alexander is in the doorway, phone still in hand, eyes locked on me. "How much did you hear?" he asks, and I can't tell if it's a threat. "Enough," I tell him, voice stronger than I feel, loud enough that it sounds like challenge. "Everything. I heard you threaten someone named James Redmond and promise to make him pay." Alexander's expression hardens, but he doesn't look away, doesn't pretend I misunderstood, and somehow his honesty is more frightening than a lie would be. He pockets his phone and leans against the door frame, all controlled danger in expensive clothes, and tells me I should get some rest. I should. But anger is burning through the fear now, bright and clarifying. "You can't just keep me here. I have a job. I have a roommate who'll worry. I have a life." His smile is cold, doesn't reach his eyes. "Your job is cleaning penthouses at $200 a day. I'll pay you $5,000 for every day you stay here. Your roommate has been contacted and told you're dealing with a family emergency. Your life is currently in my hands, and I'm keeping it safe whether you appreciate that or not." The casual arrogance ignites something reckless in me, and I step toward him instead of away. "You don't own me. You can't just decide what I do and where I go. This is kidnapping." He doesn't move, but his attention sharpens, focuses entirely on me in a way that makes my skin prickle. "You want to call the police, Clara? Tell them you're being held by Alexander Fitzwilliam? See how that works out for you?" The threat is obvious, and I hate him in that moment. Hate the power he has. Hate that he's right. Hate most of all the part of me that understands why he's doing this. "You're a criminal," I say, wanting to wound him. "You're exactly what everyone thinks you are." He pushes off the door frame and closes the distance between us in 2 strides, and suddenly he's too close, overwhelming, his voice dropping low and dangerous. I never pretended to be anything else. I never claimed to be a good man. I run an empire built on violence and fear and money. I hurt people who cross me. I break laws every single day. But my mother is dying in a hospital bed because someone got past my security and put a knife in her, and I will burn the entire city down to find who did it and make them pay. And you, Clara Whitmore, are staying here where I can protect you, because you were there and you helped her, and now you're a target, whether you want to be or not." His intensity steals my breath, and for a moment, we stand frozen, too close, the air between us crackling with tension and anger, and something else I don't want to name. Then his control cracks, and what breaks through isn't more anger, but raw vulnerability that makes my chest tighten. "She's all I have." His voice rougher now, quieter. "My father died when I was 19, shot in front of me over a territory dispute that should have been negotiated, but he was too proud to back down. My mother held me together. She raised me in this world but tried to keep me human. She failed mostly, but she never stopped trying. She never stopped loving me even when I became exactly what my father was. If she dies because I failed to protect her, then I have nothing left. Clara, I have nothing left. The confession breaks something in me, and the anger drains away, leaving exhaustion and unwanted sympathy. I'm sorry, I say, and mean it. About your father, about your mother. I hope she recovers. Alexander studies me like I'm a puzzle he can't solve. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I ask. Someone hysterical? Weak? You're neither. I'm terrified, I admit. But still standing, he says, and there's something almost like respect in his voice. The moment stretches between us, charged and strange, and I'm suddenly aware of how close he is. The heat of him, the intensity of his focus. Then Thomas appears in the doorway and the spell breaks. Boss, we have a problem. Redmond's men are asking questions about a maid who found Mrs. Fitzwilliam. They have a description. They're looking for her. Ice floods my veins, and Alexander's expression goes cold and lethal. Double security here and at the hospital. I want every man we have on this. He turns to me, and his eyes are hard, but underneath I see fear. They know about you, Clara. You're not just a witness anymore. You're a target. We leave before dawn. Alexander silent as he issues commands to Thomas, while I throw borrowed clothes into a bag I have never owned. Moving again, the fourth location in 4 days. And I should be exhausted by the constant upheaval, but adrenaline is a bitter fuel keeping me alert and afraid. The cars are waiting outside, 3 of them, security protocol that tells me how serious the threat is, and I climb into the middle vehicle with Alexander, while armed men I do not know fill the others, a convoy leaving the city as sunrise bleeds orange across the horizon. We drive for over an hour into countryside I have never seen, estates hidden behind gates and walls, money insulating itself from the ordinary world. And when we finally turn through iron gates that swing open at our approach, I see the house and my breath catches, because calling it a house is like calling the ocean a puddle. The estate sprawls across manicured grounds, all stone and glass and architectural drama, fountains and gardens and security cameras tracking our progress up the long drive, and Alexander watches me take it in with an expression I cannot read. "This is home," he says simply, the first words he has spoken since we left the city. "You will be safe here." Safe feels like a relative term when armed guards patrol the perimeter, and the house has more rooms than I can count. But I follow him inside where staff materialize to take bags and offer refreshments. An older woman with kind eyes introducing herself as Martha, who has clearly been warned about me because she smiles and says, "Your suite is ready, Miss Whitmore," and I want to laugh at being called Miss Anything in a place like this. Alexander shows me to the guest wing himself, opening double doors onto rooms that are larger than my entire apartment, bedroom and sitting area and bathroom with a tub that could fit 4 people, all decorated in soft grays and creams that manage to feel warm despite the luxury. "You will be comfortable here," he says, and there is something almost uncertain in his voice, as if my comfort matters more than my compliance. I should thank him, but the words stick in my throat because I am still a prisoner, even if the cage is gilded, still trapped even if the trap is beautiful. Alexander seems to sense my thoughts, and his jaw tightens. "I know this is not what you want, Clara, but until Redmond is dealt with, you cannot be exposed. And here I can protect you. I have 30 men on the grounds, cameras everywhere, protocols for every threat scenario. Nothing will get to you here." His intensity makes something twist in my chest, fear and something dangerously close to gratitude tangling together. I nod, because what else can I do? And he leaves me alone in luxury that feels like exile. That night, dinner is served in a dining room with a table that seats 20s, just Alexander and me at one end like actors in a play about wealthy dysfunction, and the staff who bring course after course treat me with careful deference as if they cannot figure out what I am to their employer. Martha is the only one who seems comfortable, refilling my wine with a conspiratorial smile that suggests she has seen Alexander bring women here before, though something in Alexander's tension tells me that is not true. We eat in near silence until his phone rings, and he answers immediately, his entire body changing, becoming alert and almost hopeful. "She is awake," he says after listening, looking at me with something like relief breaking across his features. "My mother is conscious, and I am leaving now." He is gone within minutes, the convoy reforming to take him back to the city. And I am left in the enormous house with strangers and guards, and the creeping awareness that I am more alone than I have ever been. I explore because staying in my room feels like surrender, wandering through halls lined with art that probably costs more than I will earn in my lifetime, past closed doors and empty rooms until I find the library, 2 stories of books with rolling ladders and leather chairs and windows overlooking gardens that glow silver in moonlight. I lose myself in the books, in the quiet, in the strange peace of being surrounded by stories while living inside one I do not understand. And that is where Alexander finds me hours later when he returns. I do not hear him arrive, but suddenly he is in the doorway, jacket gone and tie loosened, and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. And when our eyes meet, something passes between us that makes my heart stutter. I wake to Thomas pounding on my bedroom door, his voice urgent through the heavy wood, and the clock glows 5:47 in pale green numbers that tell me something has gone catastrophically wrong because no one wakes Alexander's household before dawn unless the world is ending. I pull on the robe hanging in the closet that is too expensive to belong to me, and open the door to find Thomas's face carved from stone and dread, and he says the boss needs you in his office now, and I am moving before I fully understand, following him through silent hallways, while my heart hammers against my ribs like it is trying to escape. Alexander's office is full of men I recognize as his inner circle, tension thick enough to choke on. And when Alexander sees me, his expression does something complicated that might be regret or warning or apology. "Redmond sent a message," he says without preamble, and every head in the room turns toward me, like I am the problem they need to solve. "He has surveillance footage showing your face from the hospital, from the first safe house, from enough locations to prove you exist and matter. He wants the ledger in exchange for leaving you alone. Otherwise, you are marked for death, and he has the resources to make that happen, even with my protection." The words land like blows, and I cannot breathe for a moment, cannot process that my face, my existence, has become currency in a war I never asked to join. Alexander is still talking, laying out options with the cold precision of a strategist who has calculated every angle, every risk, every potential outcome. We can give him a fake ledger, buy time but not safety, because he will verify it and come back angrier. We can put you in permanent hiding, new identity, new life, but that takes time we may not have, and Redmond's reach is long. Or we use you as bait, draw out his assassin, end this decisively. The last option makes ice flood my veins, and I see my own horror reflected in Alexander's face, the way his jaw tightens and his hands curl into fists on the desk between us. "I hate this option," he says, his voice dropping lower, rougher. "I hate everything about it, but it is the fastest way to eliminate the threat, and I will not have you living in fear for months or years, waiting for Redmond to find you." The silence stretches, while every man in the room waits for me to break, to refuse, to demand they find another way. And maybe yesterday I would have. But yesterday I was not staring at a future of running forever, of hiding, of being afraid every time someone knocked on a door or passed too close on a street. "Use me as bait," I hear myself say, and the words sound stronger than I feel. Alexander's head snaps up and his eyes lock on mine with an intensity that makes my skin prickle. "Absolutely not." "It is not a suggestion," I tell him, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "I will not spend the rest of my life hiding. I will not let Eleanor's attacker win. I am already involved, already a target. We might as well end it." The argument that follows is brutal, Alexander's protective instinct crashing against his strategic mind while I stand my ground and refuse to bend, refuse to be the weak thing he needs to shelter. Thomas watches with something like approval, the other men with barely concealed surprise, and finally Alexander concedes, but his conditions are non-negotiable. My best men, my plan, my control, he says, and you follow every order without question, or this does not happen. I nod because I can see the fear beneath his authority, the terror that he is sending me into danger and might not be able to keep me safe. They plan for hours, mapping my apartment, assigning positions, building contingencies, and I sit in the corner watching Alexander transform from the man who held me in the library to the commander who built an empire on calculated violence. The day arrives too quickly and too slowly, hours of waiting that stretch like torture until it is time, and I am changing into my own clothes that feel wrong after days in borrowed luxury. And Alexander finds me before I leave. His hands grip my shoulders hard enough to hurt, and his eyes are fierce and desperate when he says, "You do exactly what Thomas tells you. You do not improvise. You do not play hero." I am not the hero in this story, I tell him, trying to smile and failing. You saved my mother's life, he says, his voice breaking slightly. You are already the hero. Then he pulls me into an embrace that steals my breath, fierce and brief and full of everything we have not said, and when he releases me, his face is hard and controlled again. Do not die, he orders. I will try not to, I promise, and walk away before my courage fails. The staged escape happens exactly as planned, Thomas orchestrating a loud argument with the guards outside my door where I scream about being held prisoner and needing air and my rights, and they let me slip past them with just enough struggle to look real, while knowing every camera in the building is feeding footage to whoever is watching for Redmond. I take a taxi back to my neighborhood, and my hands shake on my thighs the entire ride, the driver glancing at me in the rearview mirror like he can smell my fear, and when he drops me at my building, I almost cannot make my legs carry me inside. My apartment looks exactly as I left it a lifetime ago, my roommate's mess in the kitchen and my own tidy corner of existence, and I go through the motions Thomas drilled into me, making tea I cannot drink, turning on lights, moving from room to room like this is normal when I know there are armed men in the apartment above and below and across the hall, Thomas himself in the maintenance closet with surveillance equipment. An entire operation built around using me as bait to draw a killer. Hours crawl past like wounded things, and every sound makes my heart stop, every creak of the building settling, every footstep in the hallway outside. And I text my roommate again, thanking whatever mercy in the universe made her visit her parents this week. Evening comes, and the shadows grow long, and I am vibrating with tension when the knock finally sounds at my door, solid and businesslike, and I move to the peephole on legs that barely hold me. Delivery man in uniform holding a box, face partially obscured by a cap. And this is it, this is the moment, and I open the door because that is the plan. He moves fast, too fast, shoving inside and kicking the door shut behind him, and suddenly there is a knife in his hand, long and ugly and aimed at my throat. And he demands the ledger in a voice that shakes with its own fear or rage or both. I do not have it, I stammer, backing away with my hands up. I do not know anything. I just found her. Please. But he does not believe me, advancing with the knife extended, saying Redmond wants the ledger, and you are going to tell me where it is, or I will carve it out of you. Then everything explodes into motion, Thomas and three others bursting through the door and the window simultaneously, and the man whirls toward them. But they are on him instantly, a brutal choreography of violence I can barely track. I stumble backward away from the chaos, and my foot catches on the coffee table leg, and I am falling, the world tilting sickeningly, and the corner of the table rushes up to meet my temple with a crack that turns everything white. Pain blooms hot and sharp, and my vision fractures into kaleidoscope pieces, sounds muffled and distant, and through the blur I see them subduing the man, forcing him to the floor, Thomas shouting orders. Then Alexander is there, appearing like a conjured thing, dropping to his knees beside me with his hands on my face, frantic and shaking. Clara, he says, his voice breaking on my name. Stay with me. Do not close your eyes. I try to focus on his face, but there is blood in my eyes, warm and sticky, and the room keeps sliding sideways. His arms lift me, and I am floating, consciousness slipping like water through my fingers. And the last thing I hear before darkness takes me is Alexander commanding someone to call his doctor now, his voice raw with a terror that matches the pain exploding through my skull. I wake to unfamiliar ceiling, pale cream with crown molding that costs more than my monthly rent, and for a confused moment, I cannot remember where I am or why my head feels like someone took a hammer to my skull. Then it rushes back in fragments. The knife, the fall, the blood. Alexander's frantic voice calling my name like a prayer he did not know he remembered. I turn my head carefully, testing the limits of the pain, and see a doctor closing his leather bag, gray-haired and professional, and beyond him, in the corner, Alexander still wearing black tactical gear, streaked with blood, that I realize with distant relief is not his own. Our eyes meet, and something passes between us, something raw and unshielded, before the doctor clears his throat and tells me I have a concussion and 7 stitches closing the gash at my temple, but I will be fine with rest. Alexander nods without looking away from me, and the doctor takes that as his dismissal, gathering his things and leaving us in silence so heavy it presses against my chest. Alexander approaches the bed slowly, like I might shatter if he moves too fast, and his control is shattered in a way I have never seen, his hands shaking slightly when he sits on the edge of the mattress. "You could have died," he says, his voice rough and broken. "But I did not," I tell him, still groggy from whatever the doctor gave me for the pain. "When I saw you on that floor, bleeding," he starts and then stops, cannot finish the sentence, and I see the terror still living in his eyes like a wild thing he cannot cage. My hand finds his without conscious decision, and he grips it like a lifeline, like if he lets go, I will disappear. He admits the operation was his idea, but nearly broke him to implement, watching through surveillance feeds while I faced a killer alone, unable to be in the room until the threat was neutralized, seeing that knife at my throat and knowing if anything went wrong, it would be because he put me in danger to solve his problem. "Did they get information from him?" I ask, trying to focus past the pounding in my skull. Alexander nods and tells me the man is talking, confirming Redmond ordered both hits, on Eleanor and on me, but the ledger is still missing, and without it they have threats but no leverage. I close my eyes trying to remember Eleanor's exact words through the fog of pain and medication, and suddenly it clicks into place with startling clarity. "She said James wants the ledger from the roses," I tell him. Everyone assumed from meant away from or taken from, but what if she meant location? What if from the roses is where it is hidden? She loved roses, you said she loved roses. Alexander goes very still, and I can see his mind racing through possibilities. And then he is on his phone calling Thomas, issuing rapid orders about Eleanor's property, her possessions, anywhere she kept roses, or used that word. An hour passes while I drift in and out of awareness, Alexander pacing like the predator he is, and then Thomas calls back, and I watch Alexander's face transform. Eleanor had a safety deposit box at her bank under the name Rose, Thomas reports loud enough for me to hear. We accessed it, found the ledger, everything we need to destroy Redmond's operations or leverage a permanent truce. Alexander returns to sit beside me, his hand covering mine again. "It is over," he says. "Redmond will accept terms or face total exposure. You are safe." I should feel relief, joy, triumph. Instead, I feel strange, hollow loss settling in my chest. "So I can go home," I say, and it comes out flat. Alexander's expression closes off into that careful mask. "Yes," he agrees, "whenever you are healed." Neither of us moves, and the tension builds like storm pressure, electric and dangerous. What if I do not want to go yet? I hear myself say, emboldened by concussion or proximity to death or the way he is looking at me like I am something precious and breakable. Clara, he breathes my name like prayer, like curse. You should run from me as far and fast as you can. I have been trying, I tell him honestly. I cannot seem to manage it. He leans closer and I can see the war happening behind his eyes. I am not a good man, he warns. I do not care, I whisper back, and watch his control finally fracture completely. Alexander kisses me, and the world reduces to the point of contact, his mouth on mine desperate and careful all at once, his hand cradling the uninjured side of my head like I am made of glass that might shatter under too much pressure. I respond with every ounce of need I have been suppressing since he first knelt beside me in his mother's blood, my fingers curling into the tactical vest he still wears, pulling him closer despite the pain blooming through my skull. The kiss deepens, and I taste his fear and his want, and his carefully leashed control all tangled together, and for a suspended moment, there is nothing but this, nothing but us, nothing but the electric current running between our bodies. Then he pulls back abruptly, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine with exquisite gentleness. Not like this, he says, his voice wrecked and rough. Not when you are hurt and vulnerable, and in my house where you have no real choice. I start to protest, but he covers my mouth with his fingers, silencing me. When you are healed, he says with fierce certainty. When you have a clear head and the choice to walk away. Then if you still want this, I will give you everything. I am frustrated and aching, and also somehow moved by the honor in his restraint. This dangerous man who could take what he wants, showing me more respect than I knew existed in his world. The following days are exquisite torture of a different kind. Alexander attentive as I recover but maintaining careful distance, like there is an invisible line between us, he will not cross until I am whole. I find reasons to be near him anyway, joining him for meals where we talk about nothing and everything, spending evenings in his library where he works, and I pretend to read while actually watching him over the edge of my book. He catches me looking more than once, and the heat in his eyes could ignite the air between us, but he never moves closer than propriety allows. I learn about his empire in these conversations, not just crime, but legitimate businesses, construction and restaurants and import companies, a complicated web where legal and illegal blur into gray. He learns about me too, how I dropped out of college when my mother got sick, how I spent 2 years watching her die by inches, how afterward I could not seem to find purpose in anything and took work as a maid because it was invisible work and I wanted to disappear into something that did not require me to be fully human. He sees me when I say this, really sees me, and I watch understanding dawn in his face. We are both people who learn to survive by becoming less than we are. On the 5th day, Alexander takes me to visit Eleanor in the hospital, and I am nervous, but his hand stays on the small of my back, grounding and possessive. Eleanor is awake and sitting up, still pale but alive, and when she sees me, her face transforms with recognition and gratitude. She reaches for my hand and I take it. "You saved my life," she says simply. I start to demur, but she squeezes my fingers. "This one," she says to Alexander without looking away from me. "Do not lose this one." I glance at Alexander and see something raw and unguarded in his expression before he masks it. Eleanor sees what is between us, I realize, sees it, and is giving her blessing. Driving back to the estate, Alexander and I sit in the back of the car, and his hand finds mine in the space between us. "My mother likes you," he says quietly. "I like her too," I tell him honestly. "She has never approved of anyone in my life," he admits. "Maybe your taste is improving," I say, and am rewarded with his rare smile, the one that makes him look younger and less dangerous, and entirely too appealing. At the estate, the doctor removes my stitches and declares my concussion healed and clears me for normal activity, and I watch Alexander watching the doctor leave like he is steeling himself for something difficult. He turns to me and there is finality in his posture. "You are free to go," he says. "Is that what you want?" I ask, standing to face him. "What I want is irrelevant," he says. "You deserve a life outside this world." "What if this is the life I choose?" I counter. "You do not know what you are choosing," he insists. "Then show me," I tell him, and watch the last of his resistance crumble in his eyes. Alexander shows me his world the next day, and I understand this is a test, a final chance for me to see what I am choosing before the choice becomes permanent. We start at one of his legitimate businesses, an upscale restaurant in the financial district, where the hostess greets him with deference that borders on fear, and the manager materializes within seconds to report numbers and problems. Alexander listens with half his attention, his hand on the small of my back proprietary and grounding, and I see this version of him: businessman, employer, authority figure who signs checks and makes decisions about menu changes and staffing. Then we go to the other side, a warehouse in a part of the city I would never venture alone, where men with guns stand at every entrance, and inside around a scarred table sit 5 men who go silent when Alexander enters. He does not introduce me, simply points to a chair against the wall where I sit and observe, while he conducts what can only be called court. The men report on territory, on payments collected and debts owed, on a business owner who is refusing protection, and another who wants to switch allegiance from a rival organization. Alexander listens to everything with that same controlled attention, asks pointed questions, makes decisions that are clearly final. When one man suggests making an example of the refusing business owner, Alexander's voice goes cold as winter. "We do not touch civilians who want no part of this," he says. "If he does not want protection, we leave him alone. But if Kozlov's people touch him, we respond." The man nods, chastened. Another issue. A member of their organization was caught skimming money, currently being held for Alexander's judgment. "What is the amount?" Alexander asks. 15,000, comes the answer. "Does he have family?" Alexander asks. "Wife and 2 kids, they tell him." Alexander is silent for a long moment, and I can see him weighing options, justice against mercy. "He gets one chance to pay it back," Alexander finally says. "Set up a payment plan from his wages. If he runs or skims again, he is out, and he does not come back." Understood. The meeting continues for another hour, discussions of shipments and schedules and territorial boundaries with Redmond's former organization now that the truce is holding. I watch Alexander navigate it all, see the fear others have of him, but also the respect, see how his word is law, but also how he protects those under his authority, does not tolerate abuse of power by his own men. It is not simple good or evil, not heroes and villains, but complicated men in a complicated world, operating by codes I am only beginning to understand. When we finally leave, darkness has fallen, and Alexander is silent on the drive back to the estate, tension in his shoulders, like he is bracing for my rejection. We enter the house, and I am quiet, processing everything I witnessed, and I can feel him preparing for me to say I cannot do this, cannot be part of this life. Instead, I turn to him and ask the only questions that matter. "Do you hurt innocent people?" I ask. "No," he says without hesitation. "Do you protect those who are yours?" I ask. "With my life," he says, and I hear the vow in it. "Then I can live with the rest," I tell him simply. He studies me like he is searching for doubt or fear or denial. "You are serious," he says, and it is not quite a question. I have spent 5 years invisible, going through motions of a life that meant nothing. I tell him with more honesty than I knew I had in me. "Then I found your mother bleeding and you burst into my life, and I felt awake for the first time since my mother died. I am not ready to go back to sleep." Alexander closes the distance between us in 2 strides. "If you stay, you are mine," he says, his voice rough with want and warning. "I do not share. I do not do casual. Good, I tell him. Neither do I. People will use you to get to me, he continues. Then you will protect me, I counter. I will have enemies who become your enemies, he warns. Then I will learn to defend myself, I say. He cups my face in both hands and the touch is gentle, despite the violence I know lives in those fingers. Why, he asks, and I understand he needs to hear it, needs to know this is real. Because when I look at you, I see home, I tell him, the truth of it settling in my chest like an anchor, and I have not had home in a long time. Something breaks in Alexander's face, the last wall crumbling, and he kisses me with all the restrained desire of the past weeks finally unleashed. Morning light filters through curtains I do not recognize, and for a disoriented moment, I cannot remember where I am. Then awareness returns with the weight of Alexander's arm across my waist, and the solid heat of his body curved around mine, and memory floods back with enough force to steal my breath. I am in his bed, in his room, wrapped in him after a night that rewrote every assumption I had about my life and what I wanted from it. I shift slightly and discover he is already awake, watching me with an intensity that should unnerve me, but instead sends warmth cascading through my chest. Regrets, he asks quietly, and I hear the vulnerability beneath the question. This powerful, dangerous man afraid I will take back what I gave him in the darkness. No, I tell him honestly. You, I ask, turning the question back. Only that it took this long, he says, and kisses me with a tenderness that makes my throat tight. The morning unfolds in intimate moments. His hands mapping my body in daylight, my fingers tracing scars I did not see before. Conversations punctuated by kisses and silence that feels comfortable instead of awkward. Then the world intrudes as it always does in his life, Thomas knocking and calling through the door that he has news. Alexander curses softly, extracts himself from the tangle of limbs and sheets, pulls on clothes while I watch from the bed, feeling suddenly uncertain about what happens now. He turns back before leaving, kisses me once more. Stay here, he says. I will handle this and come back. But I hear the tension in Thomas's voice through the door, and no, staying is not an option. I dress quickly in clothes I find in the closet, realize at some point my things were moved into his room without discussion. Presumptuousness that should irritate me, but instead sends a thrill through my stomach because it means he was planning this, planning me staying before I agreed. I find them in Alexander's office, Thomas looking grim, and Alexander on the phone speaking in clipped tones. When he hangs up, he sees me, and something eases in his expression. Redmond accepted the truce, he tells me. The ledger evidence was enough to force territorial agreement. My mother is being discharged from the hospital tomorrow. It is over. Relief crashes through me, so intense my knees weaken, and Alexander is there immediately, steadying me, pulling me against his chest. It is over. I am safe. We are safe. Clara, he says after a moment, and I hear the shift in his tone, pull back to look at his face. My mother wants to meet you properly. Dinner tomorrow night. Nervousness replaces relief. As what, I ask? Your employee you are sleeping with? Your prisoner-turned-girlfriend? He cups my face in both hands. As the woman I am in love with, he says, and the world stops. You love me, I breathe, needing to hear it again, needing confirmation this is real. From the moment you looked at me covered in my mother's blood and called me on my bullshit instead of cowering, he says. You are fierce and kind, and you see me as human. How could I not love you? Tears start in my eyes without permission. I love you too, I tell him. It is insane. It is too fast. I do not care. He kisses me, and I taste his smile against my mouth. Thomas clears his throat from the doorway and we break apart. His expression is apologetic but serious. News, he says. James Redmond was found dead an hour ago. Apparent suicide. But his tone says otherwise, and I watch Alexander tense against me. Who? He asks. Thomas shakes his head. Do not know yet. But someone executed him and staged it. Someone is cleaning up loose ends. Alexander and I exchange a look, and I see my own realization reflected in his eyes. It is not over after all. New threat, unknown enemy, danger we cannot see coming. Double security on my mother and Clara, Alexander orders Thomas. I want to know who did this by tonight. Thomas nods and leaves, and we are alone again, but the moment is shattered. I thought this was over, I say quietly. So did I, Alexander admits, and pulls me close. I will not let anything happen to you. I believe him, but I fear it will not be enough. The investigation takes 36 hours, and when Thomas walks into Alexander's office with the security footage, his face tells me everything before he plays the video. Eleanor. I watch the screen with growing disbelief as the timestamp shows her leaving the hospital just 8 hours after regaining consciousness, moving slowly but with unmistakable determination, getting into a car that Alexander's team traced to a service she called herself, arriving at a building Thomas identifies as one of Redmond's known locations, entering through a side door and emerging 23 minutes later with nothing visible in her hands, but something different in the way she carries herself. Victory or resignation, I cannot tell. Redmond was found dead 47 minutes after she left. Alexander watches the footage 3 times in complete silence, and I see his mind working through denial and acceptance, and something that looks like grief. We go to the hospital immediately, Alexander and Thomas and me, because he will not leave me unprotected, and perhaps because he needs me there. Eleanor is sitting up in her bed looking stronger than she has any right to, and when she sees Alexander's face, she knows. He clears the room of everyone except Thomas and me, then turns to his mother with an expression I have never seen on him, lost and angry and terrified. "Tell me I am wrong," he says, and his voice breaks on the words. "Tell me you did not do this." Eleanor meets his eyes with calm, I find shocking. "I cannot tell you that," she says simply. Alexander makes a sound like he has been struck. "Mother," he starts, and cannot finish. Eleanor gestures for him to sit, and after a long moment he does, moving like a man in a dream. I stay by the door with Thomas, witnesses to something that feels too private but too important to leave. Eleanor speaks in a voice that is steady despite her weakness. "The man who stabbed me in my own home sent someone after Clara," she says. "He threatened my son through territorial games and violence. He would have continued until one of you was dead. I could not allow that." Alexander tries to speak, but she raises a hand. "I am dying, Alexander. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. I got the diagnosis 2 months ago. I have perhaps 6 months if I am fortunate, and I do not feel fortunate." The room goes silent as a tomb. Alexander's face drains of color, and I watch his world shatter in real time. "No," he says. "No, you would have told me. We would have fought it. There are treatments." Eleanor's smile is infinitely sad. "There is nothing to fight, my darling. I have seen enough doctors to know when the battle is already lost. I made my peace with it. But I could not make peace with leaving you and Clara in danger from a man like Redmond when I had the power to remove that danger. So I did." Alexander stands abruptly, paces to the window, his control fracturing. "You killed a man," he says to the glass. "You could go to prison. They could use this against us." Eleanor's voice is gentle. "Who will prove it? An old woman with cancer leaving a hospital is not evidence of murder. Redmond had countless enemies. The investigation will go nowhere because no one wants it solved." Alexander turns back to her, and I see tears on his face for the first time. "I cannot lose you," he says. And he sounds like a child. Eleanor holds out her hand and he goes to her, kneels beside the bed like he is praying. "You are going to lose me," she tells him with terrible kindness. "But not today, not to prison or revenge. When I go, it will be on my terms, surrounded by people I love. And I will go knowing you are safe and loved, and that I did everything a mother could do." She looks past Alexander to me. Take care of my son, Clara. He will need you when I am gone. I nod, cannot speak past the grief choking me for this woman I barely know but have come to care for the man I love who is breaking apart in front of me. Alexander rises, kisses his mother's forehead, and walks out of the room. I follow him into the hallway where he stands with his back against the wall, breathing hard. I go to him, and he pulls me against him so tightly I can barely breathe, but I do not complain. We stand there while the world rearranges itself around us, and I understand that the real story is just beginning, not the one about danger